80 years. That is how long it took two gods to settle who would rule Egypt after one of them murdered the other's father. Not 80 days of war, 80 years of courtroom arguments, physical combat, and magical trickery fought in front of a divine tribunal that kept finding reasons not to decide. If you have not seen how it started, that story is in Season 1, Episode 4. What this episode covers is what came after the murder. Because Set did not simply take the throne and hold it. The story of Horus and Set is not a story about good defeating evil. The Egyptians were far too sophisticated for that. It is a story about what it actually costs to restore order after someone has shattered it. And the cost was higher than anyone expected. After Set murdered and dismembered Osiris, the goddess Isis spent years searching for every piece of her husband's body. She found 13 of the 14 pieces. She reassembled him. She performed a resurrection that no other god in the Egyptian pantheon could have managed. And from that resurrection, she conceived a son. Horus was born in secret, hidden in the marshes of the Nile Delta. While Set ruled Egypt above, Isis raised him in hiding until he was old enough to make his claim. The claim was straightforward in Egyptian theology. Osiris had been king. Horus was the son of Osiris. The throne of Egypt belonged to him by every law of divine succession that existed. Set's counter-argument was equally straightforward. He was already on the throne. He was the strongest god in Egypt, the only one powerful enough to defend the sun against the chaos serpent Apophis every night. Egypt needed him, and he was not going to step aside for a child who had grown up in a swamp. Both arguments had merit. That was the problem. The Ennead, the council of 9 gods who constituted the highest divine authority in Egyptian cosmology, could not agree on which one outweighed the other. And so what began as a legal dispute became something that lasted 80 years and left both gods permanently marked by what it cost them. The primary source for the conflict between Horus and Set is a document called the Contendings of Horus and Set, preserved on a papyrus dating to around 1150 BCE. It reads less like sacred scripture and more like a legal comedy that occasionally turns horrifying. The Ennead convened on the island of the Middle, a neutral ground between the two claims. Ra, the sun god, presided, and Ra's position created the central problem every night. Set stood at the prow of the solar bark and drove back Apophis, the serpent of chaos that tried to swallow the sun. Without Set, Ra did not make it through the night. That practical necessity made Ra reluctant to strip Set of his power, regardless of what the law said about succession. The deliberations went on for decades. Every time Thoth and the majority of the council ruled in favor of Horus, Ra found a reason to reopen the debate. At one point, Ra became so frustrated with the proceedings that he had to be talked out of simply awarding Egypt to Set by decree. Isis did not limit herself to legal argument. She disguised herself as a beautiful widow and tricked Set into condemning himself with his own words, describing a scenario that was an exact parallel to his theft of Osiris's throne. Set said the hypothetical usurper should be stripped of everything. Thoth noted that Set had just described his own actions. Set realized what had happened. He was furious. It changed nothing. The debate continued. While the tribunal deliberated, the two gods fought directly. They raced as hippopotamuses in the Nile. Isis intervened with a harpoon and accidentally drove it into Horus first, then Set. Neither contest was clean. Neither produced a result. Set challenged Horus to a boat race with boats made of stone. Set hewed an enormous vessel from a mountain. Horus built a wooden boat coated in white gypsum plaster to resemble stone. Set's boat sank immediately. Horus's sailed cleanly. The tribunal noted it. The debate continued anyway. Then came the contest that left a permanent mark on both gods. Set attacked Horus in the night and tore out his left eye. The eye was not merely a physical organ. In Egyptian theology, the eye of Horus was a symbol of cosmic wholeness, of the protective power that held the world in order. Its destruction was an act against the fabric of reality itself. Thoth found the pieces, reassembled the eye, and restored it to Horus. The restored eye became the Wadjet, one of the most enduring symbols in Egyptian religion, representing healing and the return of what had been taken. Horus retaliated. In a confrontation the texts record with unusual directness, Horus castrated Set. Set's wound was equally permanent and equally symbolic. The god of chaos had been marked as someone who could no longer pass on what he was. After decades of stalemate, Thoth found the move that broke the deadlock. He suggested the tribunal write a letter to Osiris himself, the god of the dead, the murdered king, the one person whose opinion on the succession of his own throne had never been formally sought. The letter was sent to the underworld. Osiris responded. His answer was not diplomatic. He told the tribunal in direct terms that his son Horus should have the throne. He reminded the gods that the wheat and the barley that fed them came from his domain. And then he made a threat none of the assembled deities could dismiss. He told them that every one of them would come to his kingdom eventually. He could make that journey comfortable, or he could not. Ra heard the letter read aloud and reportedly said that Osiris made a fair point. The weight of the dead outweighed the strength of the living, even when the living were gods. The argument that had gone in circles for 80 years suddenly had nowhere left to go. The Ennead ruled in favor of Horus. After 80 years of deliberation, physical combat, magical contests, legal trickery, and a letter from the underworld, the tribunal reached the conclusion that Egyptian divine law had pointed toward from the beginning. The son of the murdered king inherits the throne, Ma'at, the principle of cosmic rightness that underpinned everything in Egyptian theology is satisfied. Horus was crowned king of Upper and Lower Egypt. He became the prototype for every pharaoh who would ever rule. Every king who sat on the Egyptian throne was understood to be the living embodiment of Horus. When they died, they became Osiris. The entire institution of Egyptian kingship was built on the outcome of this 80-year dispute. Set was not destroyed. He was not cast into the void. The Egyptians could not afford to destroy Set, and they knew it. He was assigned to stand at the prow of Ra's solar bark for eternity, driving back Apophis every night with the same ferocious energy that had made him so dangerous when it was pointed at Egypt's throne. His chaos was redirected. He was given the job that only he could do. Horus gets the living world. Set gets the sky and the storms and the endless war against the darkness. Egypt gets its king, and Ra gets through the night. The Egyptians spent 3,000 years building one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen. And at the center of their theology was not a story of good triumphing cleanly over evil. It was a story of 80 years of argument, mutilation, legal maneuvering, divine frustration, and a letter from a dead god that finally settled what living gods could not. What they understood and encoded into their sacred texts with remarkable honesty is that order is not the natural state of things. Order is what you get after an enormous amount of work, patience, and cost. The Eye of Horus is a symbol of restoration because it was first a symbol of destruction. You cannot have the healing without the wound that preceded it. Set never stopped being chaos. Horus never stopped being the heir who had to fight for every inch of what was rightfully his. Osiris never came back to life. The wound that Set inflicted on the world when he murdered his brother never fully closed. It just became something that Egypt learned to carry. The sun still rose every morning. That was the point. Not that everything was fixed. That despite everything, the sun still rose. The tribunal deliberated for 80 years. and could not reach a verdict until a dead god threatened them from the underworld. Ra knew the law favored Horus from the beginning. He delayed the ruling for 8 decades because he needed Set too much to let the law take its course. Is that pragmatism, or is it the oldest story in the world? The rules apply to everyone except the people powerful enough to ignore them. Next time on Gods and Empires, we travel to ancient Persia, to a mythology built on the most unforgiving idea any religion has ever produced. The universe was born divided, light on one side, darkness on the other. 2 forces equal in power locked in a war that began before the first human being drew breath and will not end until the last day of existence. Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, the god of light and the god of destruction. The war between them is not a metaphor. It is the structure of reality itself. The first cosmic war in history is waiting.